You guys don't need to worry about me getting revenge from Diddy. I've got three moves that make sure he'll never be able to come after me or my family. First, I personally reached out to the victims' legal teams. The real reason he's not getting out is those buried cases behind the scenes. I provided legal funding for 7 victims who had been silent for years and brought in the top criminal attorneys in the country. Second, I bought up every potential post-release business deal he had lined up. I planned this 2 years in advance, so by the time he got sentenced and still had hope of getting out, every partner had already cut ties with him. Third, I don't just have evidence, I've got backups. This is an entire minefield that's been buried for 20 years. I uncovered every secret from the last 30 years. With testimonies from the victims, we interviewed over a dozen people he tricked, threatened, or violated. You think that's harsh? No. He destroyed other people's lives for decades. I'm just making sure he spends a few extra years in prison for it. I'm not afraid of his people, not afraid of his threats. I know he's still in there fantasizing about a comeback, but the truth is, he's never coming back.
Since real life, I feel crazy. The world is spinning around me. What's happening? You have 4 eyes. I have 2 fingers.
For the better part of a decade, the entertainment world treated certain moments like static. Background noise too inconvenient to turn up. Clips were laughed off at dinner tables, uncomfortable moments were quietly buried, and the kind of follow-up questions that deserved answers were never asked. But something has changed, with 50 Cent stepping forward with a documentary that refuses to let the past stay archived. Not the entire timeline surrounding Diddy is being pulled back into the spotlight and looked at with fresh, unforgiving eyes. At the heart of this story sits a collision of power and vulnerability that Hollywood has never been particularly good at addressing honestly. On one side, Sean Diddy Combs, a man whose influence over the music industry was so total that it shaped not just careers but the entire cultural conversation for 2 decades. On the other, a teenage Justin Bieber, a child prodigy dropped into a world built for adults. This isn't a conversation born out of social media speculation or viral clip culture. It is a reckoning with power, with deliberate silence, and with the very human tendency to look away when looking closer might cost something.
Yeah, so as soon as you turn 16, you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna let you rock this every time you're in LA. Yeah, it's gonna be yours. So every time you come to LA, it's a little dusty, but come get the front shot at this.
Man.
Man out. Minute.
Woo. Okay.
Okay.
All right, so I'm gonna be driving this next year.
Yeah, when you get 16, you come down, you gotta, wear your seat.
I mean, I'm 15. You could ride in the passenger seat. I got my permit. Not yet.
Yeah.
All right, 16.
You're not ready.
16.
Slow down. Let's slow down, Jess.
Okay.
Let's slow down. Okay.
One step at a time.
But yeah, the keys is yours when you get 16. You good to go.
I'm good to go.
Yeah.
All right.
Then when you get 18, you get the house. You get the mansion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Get the mansion.
Yeah.
All right. So where are we off to now?
And where'd you like to go?
I mean, wherever you want to go. Where are we going?
So check this out, yo. Justin, you ever seen the movie 48 Hours? Right now, he's having 48 hours with Diddy, him and his boy. They're having the times of their lives, like, where we hanging out and what we doing. We can't really disclose, but it's definitely a 15-year-old's dream. I have been given custody of him. He signed to Usher. I had legal guardianship of Usher when he did his first album. I did Usher's first album. I don't have legal guardianship of him, but for the next 48 hours, he's with me. So and we gonna go full crazy.
Going crazy.
Crazy.
I'm taking this out tonight.
What you wanna do? What you wanna do over the next 48 hours?
48 hours. Let's go. Let's just go get some girls. Let's go hang out some girls.
A man after my heart. That's what I'm talking about, kid.
The world sold Justin Bieber's rise to fame as a feel-good story for the internet age. A small-town Canadian kid discovered on YouTube and transformed into a global phenomenon almost overnight. And on the surface, it was exactly that. But peel back the fairy tale, and a far more complicated picture begins to develop. A minor was being guided through some of the most powerful and least regulated spaces in the entertainment industry. Darshan and the adults who were supposed to build guardrails around him were often nowhere in sight. Archival footage from that era and candid interviews from those close to the scene paint a picture of a teenager routinely placed in environments where age-appropriate boundaries weren't just blurred. They weren't even part of the conversation. For years, these moments circulated within industry circles and were collectively dismissed as the quirks of celebrity culture, any written off as excess rather than examined as warning signs. But the more important issue was never about a single incident in isolation. It was about normalization, about how an entire industry trained itself to glance the other way. When a child's access to opportunity is gatekept by adults with unchecked influence, the question that never gets asked loudly enough is, who is responsible for what that child loses in exchange?
You got people in the industry that's been saying for years, this man's out of age. So now the federal government is looking at that like, yo, when is somebody going to come forward? We got this information. It's alleged information. But nobody's willing to come forward. Then they go on and say, yo, Shakur Stewart mysteriously dead. Supposed to be a self-inflicted wound. Person had everything going for him in their life. Kim Porter, dead. Somebody's car is blown up. This guy is walking around threatening other actors, people. Somebody got to get involved in it. If it ain't the state, let it be the feds. Somebody got to stop him. He's lucky that God given him the opportunity to be stopped while he's alive. He got to go to hell and catch that shit. He got a chance to repent now. Change his life.
You mentioned minors, and a lot of people have been trying to drag Justin Bieber into this situation because there's a lot of suspect looking videos with Diddy and Bieber in it, and they're making.
For years, 50 Cent's public jabs at Diddy were filed away under the category of celebrity beef. Entertaining, dramatic, and ultimately dismissed as the noise of two powerful egos in conflict. His claims of knowing what went on behind closed doors were treated as rivalry talking, not as credible concern. But the cultural moment has shifted in a way that is impossible to ignore, and those old statements are being dusted off and read in an entirely different light, one shaped by federal scrutiny, a mounting legal pressure, and a public that is no longer willing to let inconvenient truths stay buried. That shift does not automatically validate every word 50 Cent has ever said. Critical thinking still applies. But what it does do is reframe the conversation around intent and timing in a meaningful way. Warnings do not require a courtroom verdict to be real. They can exist, and have existed, long before the evidence becomes public record. There is something deeply uncomfortable embedded in that idea. When a warning comes from someone who is seen as an enemy, it is so much easier to throw it in the trash. And that raises a question worth sitting with. How many early alarms have been lost to history simply because the person sounding them wasn't convenient enough to believe? Access was the currency that mattered most. He controlled entry to the rooms where careers didn't just grow. They either launched or quietly died. And Justin Bieber's closeness to that orbit wasn't an accident or a coincidence. It was the product of an industry logic so deeply embedded that almost no one thought to question it out loud. That in entertainment, opportunity doesn't flow through meritocracy or transparent systems. It flows through power brokers, And proximity to those brokers is the price of admission. That dynamic placed young artists in a position where saying yes to the wrong thing and saying no to it carried wildly different consequences. The closer you stood to influence, the faster your career could move, and the harder it became to protect your own boundaries in the process. Bieber was no exception to that rule. He was, in many ways, the clearest example of it.
So Diddy bought his son a Bentley. Maybe, he could buy you one also.
Got me a Lamborghini.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice.
I haven't gotten it yet, though.
Yeah, I know. When is that coming, that Lamborghini? We talked about this last time.
The Lamborghini for a day or two, and he had access to the house, and he knows better than be talking about the things that he does with Big Brother Puff on national television. Apparently not. Everything ain't for everybody.
Believe the guy in the tape is white?
If he's bigger than Diddy, and he's not none of the names that I said, probably so. But then they say he was young too.
Yeah, they say he was young.
Let me get his name right. I hope it ain't the Bieber. I hope it's not the Bieber.
Good one. It might be him. But if they saying that the guy is young and he's an A-lister, I can't think of that many black people, man.
Right. Not at all. And somebody that's more powerful, more of a celebrity than Diddy. You understand what I'm saying? If they were saying somebody that was more celebrity than Diddy, he was an A-lister, he was younger. You know what I'm saying? And if he's not black, it would have to be the Bieber. That's his name, Bieber? They said I got that wrong too. Justin Bieber, allegedly. I don't know, bro.
Right. But when you heard the news that Diddy, he had to cheat with another man, did that catch you by surprise?
Well, all this shit is by surprise to me. A lot of this shit is by surprise to me, to be totally honest, man. Because I knew Puff. I knew Puff Dad.
What troubles many of the observers who have studied this era most closely isn't only the question of what may have happened behind closed doors. It is the glaring, almost theatrical absence of any meaningful public oversight at a time when the warning signs were visible to anyone willing to look. When an entire industry structures itself so that career advancement runs directly through proximity to authority, something quietly but profoundly shifts. And that boundaries stop being firm lines and start becoming things that can be negotiated, traded, or quietly surrendered. In that kind of ecosystem, the ability to say no, and to say it without consequence, becomes an almost theoretical concept. Who, in that environment, is actually empowered to push back? And more pointedly, what happens to the people who do? The careers that stall, the relationships that go cold, the opportunities that evaporate. These aren't just personal costs. They are the mechanism through which silence gets enforced, and through which a culture of looking away sustains itself generation after generation.
I knew Diddy before he was Love and Brother Love and back to Diddy. So, no, but the diddler, he's the diddler now. A lot of it's surprising, but it's not unheard of. Because you hear of all kinds of shit. And whether it registered with you or you internalize it or something like that, that's a whole nother story. But a lot of this stuff it's crazy. But this is the world that we live in now, man. That these individuals think is all right. Bruh, when does it come all right to be sitting there eating food off a naked woman? When did we start doing what they do? Let's keep it a buck. When did we start doing what they do? These guys is popping pills. These got Jay-Z dancing with a chick that
Long before Justin Bieber
ever entered the conversation, Usher sat down and publicly described being handed off to Diddy's world as a teenager, an experience he would later reflect on as one that exposed him to adult realities and adult environments far before he had the tools or the context to process them. That isn't gossip. That is documented personal testimony, And it matters enormously because it does something that rumor cannot. It establishes precedent. When the same pathway, young talent, powerful gatekeeper, adult world with no guardrails, repeats itself across different artists, different generations, and different decades, the word coincidence starts to lose its credibility. It begins to look less like a series of isolated incidents and more like a structure, a system with a repeating design, and that is the detail that makes this story so much harder to dismiss. If discomfort was acknowledged openly the first time around, if people within the industry knew what was being handed to these young artists, then the question that demands an answer is painfully simple. Why was nothing changed before the next child walked through the same door?
Make you change your mind. Look at little Mary Beth. To go out there too.
So would you say someone like Justin Bieber is a victim? I just seen he is reportedly selling his whole catalog because he's broke.
Yeah. Yeah. And once he finishes getting that money, I don't understand why he's broke. He didn't have to be broke. Usher just wouldn't stop rapping.
Damn.
I mean, Usher couldn't keep his kids out of his top. It's funny. He got him signed and turned over custody to Diddy, and boys was never the same, and neither was Usher's pocket, because Usher's been living off of Justin Bieber's money. He ain't been living off of his own. Because the truth is, Usher don't really make that kind of money. And I'm really just kind of sick and tired of Usher.
Yeah,
I'm really kind of disgusted with Usher Raymond, who does group wrestling nude with men who off flakes allegedly. Like, I'm sick and tired of this guy who everyone knows got the Diddy bump. He's been sued for the law. Still sitting there, gracing women in front of their men who bought the tickets. Like that whole
he's causing a lot of divorce courts.
But why? He don't even want them. The women, he's literally doing it just to destroy relationships.
As the legal and cultural walls began to close in around Diddy, a fascinating and telling split emerged among the celebrities who had once shared his orbit. The majority chose silence, a careful, calculated quiet that said everything by saying nothing. Meanwhile, 50 Cent leaned into the microphone. He doubled down, amplified, and continued to speak with a specificity that made many in the industry visibly uncomfortable. That contrast is not a small thing. It is, in its own way, a window into exactly how these ecosystems maintain themselves. Because in entertainment, speaking up doesn't just carry a moral cost, it carries a professional one. It risks relationships, closes doors, and reshapes the way the powerful see you. Silence, on the other hand, preserves all of that. It keeps the dinner invitations coming and the phone calls getting returned. In that environment, loyalty and self-preservation become so tangled together that it's nearly impossible to tell where one ends and the other begins. That isn't cowardice so much as it is cold, rational calculation, but it raises a question that the industry has never answered satisfactorily. In a world where silence is the smartest career move, what real space is left for accountability to breathe?
Just a video of an interview of Justin Bieber, and he was talking about Billie Eilish. And he was like, he was broke, almost in tears. He's like, I just want to protect her. I just want to keep her safe.
Yeah.
What do you think he went through?
Because he knows what's been happening to Billy. Just like everybody knew what was happening to Millie Bobby Brown, so with Drake. These people are monsters.
Jermaine Dupri said something interesting. He said the reason that R&B isn't as powerful as it is anymore is because children aren't going to church. And what is it about the transfer from the spiritual to the secular do you believe that's what made R&B so powerful?
Understand this. Rhythm and blues was a combination of gospel and soul music. Because soul music has always been around in one form or another. It's just evolved throughout the years. And you got gospel, rhythm and blues. That's what put that together. That's why they made such a big thing about the Ray Charles incorporating gospel sounds into secular music. Because they wanted people to separate the two. This is demon, this is good. The truth is none of that's real. There is no bad, there is no good. There is what is and there is what is not. And that's sad. But when you take the spirit that comes.
Justin Bieber has never stood before a camera or in a courtroom and leveled a criminal accusation at Diddy. That fact is important, and it deserves to be stated clearly. But the absence of a formal allegation does not mean the absence of a story. Because what Bieber has said publicly, across interviews, social media reflections, and deeply personal moments shared with his audience, builds a picture that anyone paying close attention cannot simply walk past. And yet, he has spoken about being overwhelmed at an age when he should have been finding himself. About the anxiety that colonized his teenage years. About losing control of his own life and narrative while surrounded by adults who had their own interests firmly at the center of every decision. He has described not having the emotional vocabulary or the personal infrastructure to protect himself in spaces where he was clearly the least powerful person in the room. Taken individually, these are the kinds of reflections that get filed under the price of fame. Taken together, they form something more significant, a record that quietly but persistently complicates the simple, celebratory version of his story.
That just testified against Diddy to the grand jury and had to give up 8 videotapes to the feds that contained celebrities in these freak-offs with Diddy is now listing some of the names that he saw on these tapes. And this man said that he got these tapes from a very close friend of Kim Porter's, and these were Kim Porter's tapes that she was going to use against Diddy. And some of the names that he says are some that we have heard rumored over the years. He said he saw Justin Bieber on this tape and he appeared to be underage during this time. He also saw Usher on these tapes and Usher definitely appeared to be underage. And this one gave me the chills because we've heard that Usher is the one that sent Justin Bieber to Diddy. Courtney Burgess sat down with the Too Strong channel here on YouTube and started naming some of the celebrities that he saw on these tapes.
Were kids involved in these parties that you can verify from looking at tapes? Yeah. Justin Bieber was older. Yeah. Actually was older. Well, actually definitely young. Okay. Yeah. And it showed the past where I was on the team. It looked like he came home from a
went on to explain how Danny Boy was also in one of these videos with Mary J. Blige and Diddy together. And Danny Boy admitted when he was 15 that Mary J. Blige flew him out to New York and he slept with her while he was under.
The conversation this raises is not a legal one. The courts have their own lane and their own standards. This is something older and more human than any courtroom process can fully contain. Trauma does not follow a neat procedural timeline. It does not always announce itself with an accusation or a police report or a clear, nameable event. More often than not, it surfaces years after the fact, as damage that has no official label, and as behavior that doesn't quite make sense until it suddenly does, as a version of a person who can't entirely explain why they became who they became. If harm operates systemically, if it is baked into the structure of an industry rather than limited to the actions of one individual, then demanding a single pointed accusation before acknowledging that harm is intellectually dishonest. It is a standard of proof that protects the system rather than the people the system has failed. And that standard has kept too many real conversations from ever properly starting.
Mary J. Danny Boy, okay. You know what Danny Boy is? I heard that before. I don't, I've been so far away from hip hop, I forgot, but I have heard that name, Danny Boy. Danny Boy, back then, she was actually
He also claimed that Jaden Smith, Will Smith's son, were in these videos, and he also said that there was photographs and videos of Diddy eating off of young girls.
Pictures, images of various stuff. Yeah, I mean, Bieber, Will Smith sang, that's all his name was. Other female on the team, they like those young, he's awesome. A lot of entertainers, and then got calls from shit going on, and that's all we were talking about.
And I have said that if this man testified to the grand jury, the feds had to have some reason to bring him in to actually testify against Diddy. But y'all let me know what you guys think about this man.
The moment Diddy's name entered federal court proceedings, the entire public conversation about him underwent a fundamental transformation. What had lived for years in the territory of rumor, conjecture, and online speculation was suddenly subject to an entirely different set of rules. Evidence standards, legal definitions, documented timelines. Charges were filed. Proceedings moved forward. The machinery of the justice system, slow and imperfect as it always is, began doing what it was designed to do, narrowing the field of what could be responsibly claimed while simultaneously opening up a much wider institutional examination. But courts are not designed to answer every question that a society needs answered. They address actions. They define legal guilt or innocence. What they cannot do is close the larger conversation about culture, about systemic design, about the conditions that allowed certain things to go unchallenged for so long. A legal verdict, in any direction, does not retroactively rewrite the environment that produced the behavior under scrutiny. Legality and morality have never been the same thing, and a courtroom closing a case has never once meant that the broader conversation should close with it.
Do you think he has a mole or an informant in his camp that's cooperating?
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. Listen, bro. Just doing law enforcement myself, just take for instance. I think the individual was a Syracuse former basketball player named Jason Barnes or Beard or something like that. He already had drug charges against him. The day Diddy house get raided, they catch him getting on a plane and they put him into custody. Didn't that sound a little weird? People didn't catch that. They either put him in custody for a couple of reasons. You understand? One, to make a witness out of him, or to safeguard him and protect him for anything that could happen to him, because they had already stated, allegedly, that he was some kind of mule for the people over there at Diddy's house. So now, with that information, that he was already known by the government for drug charges, wouldn't that be an individual that you use? I'm going to give you something different. And I'm going to give you something else that people don't even think. On the other day, I seen on the video that Puff had ran into Justin Bieber. They met up. And he started tapping him as if he was searching him, and see if he had some kind of device on. Did you see that?
Yep.
Check this out. What if the federal government have already talked to Justin Bieber? And Diddy did that on tape. That means in his mind, he think this person may be a witness. Right?
Step back far enough from the individual names, 50 Cent, Diddy, Justin Bieber, and what comes into focus is something much larger and much older than any single story. It is a portrait of how celebrity systems are engineered to function and who they are engineered to protect. Power concentrates at the top and stays there. Risk is distributed downward, absorbed most heavily by the youngest and the least connected. And accountability, when it arrives at all, arrives last, long after the damage has been done and long after the people responsible have moved on to the next thing. Youth gets packaged and sold as authenticity. Access gets rebranded as mentorship. And silence gets rewarded with the kind of professional longevity that speaking up rarely earns. This is not a story that is looking for a confession or waiting on a verdict. It is a story about conditions, about the architecture of an industry that keeps producing the same outcomes across different eras, different names, and different faces. That is what makes it so hard to look away from. When identical patterns keep surfacing and keep leaving real damage in their wake, the individual actors eventually become secondary to the structure itself. At some point, the system is no longer just the backdrop to the story. It becomes the story, and at that point, the only responsible question left to ask is whether anyone with the power to change it has any real intention of doing so.